Well, I have to say, it feels like I've turned a corner, and for the first time in this project, the finish line is in sight. It's still far, I've got a lot of race left to run, but we're definitely closer to the finish line than the start at this point. Outside of the DLC we'll cover next week, we could in a lot of ways consider Syndicate to be the last Assassin's Creed game. Whether you like them or not, it's hard not to argue that the next three games following this entry feel as though they don't belong in the same series. That being said, though, here at the end, we already find ourselves so far removed from what the first entry defined as Assassin's Creed that it's hard to view even this as part of that series. The skeleton is here, but for my money, the heart's on its last leg and the soul has long since departed. I don't want to get into that right now, so for the time being, we can just talk about our little trip to London. This one was a little weird for me. I probably spent more time in this world than any other outside of Black Flag, but I find myself with no urge to return. It's not from any hatred after completion like Unity or Connor's entry, but it's certainly a different feeling than the others. When I finished Black Flag and Revelations, I thought, man, I can't wait to let this sit for a year and give it another playthrough. With Rogue and Brotherhood, I thought that I would really enjoy being brought back for a replay, maybe streaming it or needing it for another video. But with Syndicate, I did damn near everything there is to do in the game, coming far closer to 100% than I usually do, and yet at the end of it, I found myself relieved. Not hating it, but certainly not wanting to come back. I have a lot of feelings on basically every aspect of this game, so let's get into it. There will be no restraint on spoilers, and that's been your warning. If you're ready, let's go.
And deem it but a faded light which beams within your eyes, when hollow hearts must wear a mask.
Mr. Starrick.
I told you not to disturb me!
I find myself loving the streets of London like no other Assassin's Creed game, and yet it ties into one of my biggest problems with the game. So here when playing as the Fry Twins, you'll find yourself at the head of a gang known as the Rooks, with the majority of your enemies being the rival gang, the Blighters. There's this really cool feeling in the game as you take over more and more territory, you will find yourself with a ton of friendly faces around you rather than the constant harassment you dealt with early in this game or in all the other games. I loved walking down the streets and being greeted by one of my Rooks, just a little was such a nice change of pace. Also, seeing them act out on their own, getting into fights with Blighters when they're walking down the street, or coming to your aid when you get into a scrap around them. And apart from the gangs, it feels like everyone in London is having an interesting conversation, which makes walking the streets feel so much livelier than ever before in the series. It's true, they can't compete to match the crowd density found in Unity, but there wasn't a lot of individual personality there. It made the city feel very unique, but not the people. This is a problem for me, however, no matter how much I like it. Yes, it's awesome to walk through town and feel like you're right at home, but it shouldn't be that way. An assassin should never have his or her name on the lips of half the town. Edward became one of the most notorious pirates in the world at the height of the Jackdaw's power, but he was still relatively unknown by the common guard. On top of that, he wasn't actually an assassin for most of the game. Altair, Ezio, and Connor had to be careful to keep a low profile, especially as their kill counts grew, but it was always the hood that guards looked for, not the men. That's how it always was, and how it always should have been. Assassins work in the shadows. Being known is a sign of failure, not success. Yes, it's true in the canon this is more of a problem for Jacob than Evie, but that's because he did so much more, but we can talk about that a little later. Let's roll this back a bit so I can contextualize what I'm saying here. The Rooks will take over a district as you tear down various Blighter strongholds in the name of various friends you make early on. Detective Abeline will have you helping to arrest various mid to high level criminals, preferring them brought in alive. You'll also free kids from their forced labor in the name of Clara, and take out Blighter stronghold in what's presented as Mr. Henry Green's area, but it's more about the gang itself. Last but not least, you'll assassinate various targets, which does in fact make more sense for our local assassin mentor in Henry. Once you've done damage in a district, the gang leader will show up, and while you have the option of killing them in the moment, and some of them seem to really want you to kill them in the moment, I suggest not doing it, so you can let them get away and the throwdown later will be more dramatic. Said throwdown will occur when you complete all parts of a district, opening up a gang fight where the Rooks and Blighters will go at it, and victory against the gang and local leader will allow you to declare yourself in charge of the area. Is this cooler than Borgia Towers and Assassin's Dens? Yeah, Fuck yeah, it is. I get to have a posh referee in a carriage lay down the rules before I get to have my Gangs of New York style throwdown. It's also awesome to have a variety of objectives I can approach in any way I want, although this is a problem in itself. The only time you have a solid incentive to stay in stealth is when you find yourself grossly underleveled for an area, but I found myself later on pulling up to so-called stealth missions, with a carriage full of rooks kicking off an all-out brawl before taking in the one guy I wanted alive. There's no real consequences to failing stealth outside of having to fight. It reminds me of Far Cry's gameplay loop in that way, but without the super fun gameplay loop that game had that made it fun. Anyways, back to my original point. Is running a gang and fighting another one a ton of fun and for the most part just pretty cool? Yeah, but it doesn't feel like Assassin's Creed. I used to recruit those talented, lowly individuals I found out in the street looking for a cause. Now I'm recruiting dudes who start knife fights in the streets. We used to stalk the streets, an assassin under a hood striking fear with just the sight of us, slipping away into a crowd never to be seen again. Now I'm stealing trains and fighting in bars. Like, what are we doing? This just feels like another one of those games that they really wish didn't have Assassin's Creed in the title, and that shows elsewhere. Parkour has been a staple of the series, and I think this is probably one of the best iterations we've seen, but we're given two very good reasons not to use it. Those two reasons are that when you need to cover large distances, free running is never the fastest option, and I mean, not even close. There's so many damn missions in this game that require you to get across a noticeable chunk of the city, and the simple truth is that the fastest way to do that is to hop in a carriage. It's not fun or something that requires a lot of skill, it's just the easiest way from point A to point B. On the other side, if you need to climb vertically, there's very little incentive not to use the grappling hook that you get early in the game. I mean, seriously, look at the side by side here. It's not even close. You can either use one input and travel faster, or you can have active inputs all the way up to the top and be slower. This isn't even a tough call. Along with the large gaps from one side of the street to the other, where, yeah, you could find a cable or a rope connecting them, or you could use the one attached to your arm. I really love the parkour here. I mean that. It has all the speed of Unity without all the wasted motion. It's great. I just so rarely found it to be the better option given the choice. I still did it quite a bit because I enjoyed it, but it was never the right thing to do. It's really the same with stealth in a lot of ways. You're given plenty of tools to sneak your way through every level, and when you use them, it feels awesome. We've had smoke grenades since the second game, and I don't think I've ever used them as often as I did here, as part of the attack instead of part of the escape. They feel so good when you pull off that sneaky kill literally there and gone in a cloud of smoke. No one knew what happened. Throwing knives actually feel really good for the first time since the first game, and were actually a mainstay tool for me. Assassinations look great no matter how you pull them off, whether it be from cover, up in the air, or just strolling up to a guy. There's things you can't quite explain in games like how things feel to actually do, but I can only describe kills from stealth as feeling good. Stealth itself, I can't totally say the same about. Physical stealth feels great, but social stealth always feels like it leads you to getting caught, so I tended to avoid it whenever possible. The kidnapping feature was good, and I often found it better when it was my choice rather than a scripted segment, either allowing me to move through blocked areas or at least plan my route through. The biggest problem with the stealth is that it's really just not necessary the majority of the time, and the combat is fun. Outside of assassination missions, I just didn't really care when I was caught. The weapon you choose, whether it be kukri, cane sword, or brass knuckles, really doesn't matter much as it's really only a way to change the animations you see when killing people. We still have gear-based progression here, but it's done so much better than Unity, with the outfits you wear being mostly meaningless and not tied to your stats outside things that don't matter like slightly more damage or carrying capacity for tools. You can look however you want to look while tearing through the Templars, and I really appreciate that. Yes, it's still annoying, you have to constantly grind levels to stay ahead of the area the main story has you operating in, but considering for the most part it's fun and you have tons of ways to do it, it's not the end of the world here. In terms of side content, there's something for basically everyone here, even beyond the area takeover quests. You can go after your enemies by stealing their cargo, either by land or by sea. You can compete in races across the city, taking you both on foot and in a carriage. You can compete in underground fight clubs that, while a little boring after the first couple of visits and seeing the same animations over and over again, do at least look pretty damn cool. There's also several storylines you can follow, like helping Charles Dickens track down the occult, which is sometimes a weird dude in an attic, and sometimes the real Spring Heel Jack just running around on rooftops doing magic and shit. You can help people who have good ideas, you can help people who have bad ideas, There's a plethora of content for you to enjoy, and I encourage you to hop into it. I will say, for all the good things I can say about Syndicate, it needs to be talked about alongside Unity for the amount of bugs that are contained within this damn game. It's actually generally not a bad thing, often more funny than infuriating. Like, people not spawning in cutscenes or whatever force is driving carriage physics. I swear those things do some of the most ridiculous stuff I've ever seen in gaming, just out there being kooky. We do get the occasional moment where a character will just refuse to climb something, which can get under my skin in any context, but the biggest thing I found hilarious is that this game is so easy to break by accident. I just don't go out of my way to ruin my own gaming experience, but there was just times in this game where I clearly got ahead of the scripting and the game didn't know how to react. Like when I was chasing this guy around and killed him with a throwing knife as he rounded a corner just to watch him fall as he was supposed to be taking a hostage. It left me stuck in what was supposed to be a quick draw, save the hostage moment, while a timer on a set of bombs ran down, forcing me to just watch because it needed me to kill the guy to allow me to run and deal with the bombs, but the guy was dead, so it triggered the timer, meaning that I just had to sit there for 2 minutes and scroll through Instagram. There was also the time I caught a guy in apparently the wrong spot and ended up literally kicking his ass from one end of the street to the other, trying to get the game to cooperate with me. These were funny, but kinda crazy that they were allowed to happen. There's really only two more things to talk about, and that's the Fry twins. We can talk about them as characters later, but for now let's talk about them from a gameplay perspective. In theory, there should be a noticeable difference between the two, with Evie's advanced stealth abilities and Jacob's more robust combat stats making them feel different, but it really doesn't. Considering they level together and will share the same or similar gear, it just doesn't change that much. Yes, it's true, I got caught sneaking a little more often with Jacob, but that's just because I didn't care as much about getting caught with him as I rarely brought him with the intention of being stealthy. It really boils down to the problem of that I didn't change my playstyle to fit the character I was playing, I changed the character I was playing to fit my playstyle. I wish there had been more done to distinguish the two in gameplay, but I'm not sure how much of a difference it would have made in the long run. At the end of the day, I don't think Syndicate reached any new heights gameplay-wise for the series. I just don't think it did anything very badly. If anything, everything it did was kind of like a 6, 7 out of 10 for me. In the second half of the game, I was mostly doing side content to level rather than because it was fun, but it certainly wasn't awful for the most part. I enjoyed being the leader of the Rooks, and I thought that it was pretty great to do so. And during assassination missions, I really enjoyed being an assassin. I just wish that more often being an assassin was the experience that was the most prevalent, not a welcome change of pace occasionally throughout the game. There's good systems in place to like a great free running mechanic, hampered by a map that makes no attempt to accommodate it, and good stealth held back by better combat. I think I'm a little burnt out here, but honestly, if I could play through the game again without having to grind so much, I would probably do it just to take part in some of those assassination missions again, like the bank, which was a total standout for me. Man, I feel like I haven't spoken this much about gameplay at any point in this series, and it feels really good to have so much to say. I just wish more of it was a ringing endorsement and not a grand old blech. However, I'm rambling and it's time to move on to the story, so I'll leave you with this. The silent revolver is a fucking lie. That wasn't quiet at all!
The assassins have brought nature's fury into our homes. Men have become monsters, barreling toward us, teeth out. Our civilization must survive this onslaught. To prevent a return of the Dark Ages, I will start anew. London must be reborn.
So, I have to be honest, I find the plot of Syndicate to be right up there, if not at the top of the most forgettable in the series, and definitely at the top of the most lackluster endings because, well, we can get into that later. We open on a modern day segment that, as usual, I don't care about. I seriously don't understand why they bother. It was bad enough when I had to do first person fetch quests, but they're seriously just cutscenes now? Just give it up. Anyways, the real game first starts on a letter from Henry Green begging for aid in the battle for London against Crawford Sterrick, our main villain in this game, who we oh so rarely see. Our two leads will be working outside of London at the start in Croydon, and we get a mission with either of them working to take down a different target for each. The missions are meant to demonstrate the differing personalities, with Jacob taking a loud approach and encouraging Evie to be more subtle, but I actually found it funny as my kill with Jacob was very assassin-like, moving quietly, getting the drop on my enemy, whereas with Evie, I got my kill at full sprint. It's just how it worked out. The two of them will elect to leave for London without orders to do so and hop on a train heading to new adventures. Upon arriving, we pretty quickly meet Mr. Green, the local and only assassin who is hanging on by a thread, and I'm sorry, but I need a minute. Yeah, I'll be straightforward. I don't like Henry because he's just kind of a little bitch, but for the love of God, why is he stuck on an island fighting for London, essentially the center of the world at the time, all by himself? This is why the assassins are always losing, I swear to God. We could have been in a losing battle for London when we started, but no, we just roll up and find this mess and have to deal with it. It's really not Henry's fault. Then we get this gang war thing. It makes sense for both sides to use a powerful local gang to do their bidding. Ezio was no stranger to using various dubious groups to help him, but this isn't that. Starrick actually uses them pretty well, staying at arm's length while using them to maintain control both of industry and the populace, while not really causing too much mayhem, to be honest. It makes total sense for the assassins to fight against this and even co-opt the Blighter's smaller rivals to do so, but they should be working with a gang, not joining it. It also makes no sense how they maintain control of the Rooks. It's not money, they don't have any to pay them, and they're not doing any crime I'm aware of. It's not an ideal, as they're not part of the Brotherhood, so what's anyone's motivation to be a part of this group outside of, well, I'm already in a gang, it might as well be theirs? On top of the fact that they make no overall difference to the plot, they at no point do anything. You're required to take over districts to progress the story, but not for any good reason, just because they say so. The Assassin's Guilds always had a place in the plot, whether big or small, but in the end here, the Assassins walk alone. It just doesn't mean anything, and I hate that. You'll do a couple of missions taking over the first district as Jacob, then meeting Alexander Graham Bell and helping him out as Evie. This is when the two will essentially split for the rest of the campaign. It's not particularly dramatic at first, but the divide did start here. Jacob will focus his efforts on tearing down Starrick's empire and building up his own influence in the city, while Evie will focus her efforts on the Piece of Eden, this time known as the Shroud. The main problem for me becomes the fact that it gets way too easy to become less and less interested in Evie, as the majority of the story missions will involve Jacob, and doing city takeover, which is the majority of the side content, feels far more relevant to him than her. I actually made an active effort to play as both of them as equally as I could, and yet I just found myself drifting farther and further into Jacob once I felt I had enough footage of Evie. We'll just use this first chapter in London as an example of the time difference. With Jacob, you will go after Starrick's soothing syrup by first tailing, then interrogating the local distributor to find out where it's produced. You'll bump into Charles Darwin at the distillery where it's made, where you'll work together to destroy it. Track down an employee of the local asylum who can tell you who's behind the syrup production, and scare him into telling you who it is by stealing his carriage and scaring him senseless. You'll then test out your new berserk darts while recovering some cable lines from Mr. Bell before experiencing possibly the worst poison effect in the history of gaming. Look at this shit.
Jokes, jokes, jokes. Make 'em laugh until they choke fairly. Slay 'em in the aisle. Make 'em fair and Princess Charming.
Oh, do not make me run like this for 500 meters. I will fucking throw up. Jesus. Then, to end the chapter, you will infiltrate the asylum and take out the doctor behind the soothing syrup, effectively removing its influences from the city in what's actually a pretty cool assassination mission. Evie, on the other hand, will steal a box, with the help of Jacob, and visit the home of Edward Kenway alongside Henry, which is cool but doesn't feel like much outside of some nostalgia. And that's it, that's her whole role in the chapter, which goes for most of the chapters. She's doing important work, don't get me wrong, but it certainly feels like she's doing far less in the end. So here's the funny thing, I started writing this sentence with what each of them is doing, but I realized Evie will be doing the same thing for all 8 chapters, and maybe that's why it feels like Jacob is doing so much more, it's just more diverse. Here in Chapter 5, Jacob will be going after the bus company the Templars are forming and will align himself with Pearl Attaway, who he was misinformed to be a competitor of the Stair Company, but is in fact working alongside him. They're cousins. When Jacob eventually figures it out, she will become the chapter's target in what's definitely the worst assassination in the game. Evie will help out Florence Nightingale, and after solving a puzzle to locate a key to the Piece of Eden, be confronted by the Templar Lucy Thorne in Starrick's right hand. During this confrontation, she will remind us that Jacob is not the only one in the family who's occasionally dumb as hell. Look at this.
Coming with me? I have have other plans. Damn it!
I mean, I would have just taken the opportunity to stab her. It was like an extra 4 inches away and not have to worry about this anymore, but whatever. The next chapter will have Jacob going after the banks, but we'll kick off with an awesome mission where Evie goes after Miss Thorne, correcting her earlier mistake. It can feel a little on rails when you zoom out, but weaving your way through Templars disguised as guards trying not to kill innocents as you work your way in for a slick kill is right up there with my favorite in the game. It may be on rails if you want this particular outcome, but so are roller coasters, and they're great. On top of that, she goes out like a total gangster, defiant to her last.
You are so short-sighted. You'd hoard power and never use it, when we would better the condition of humanity. I hope you never find the Shroud. You have no idea what it truly can do.
Tell me then.
No.
Evie will also start a trend of cleaning up the mess Jacob makes as she helps to try and allow for the rebuilding of buses meant for public transit. Jacob will go after a bank plot that will lead you to the head of said bank, who also happens to be a Templar in Twopenny, in a mission in which I screwed up the approach and yet still found myself having plenty of fun getting it done. Next up, we take a trip into politics as Jacob will befriend the Prime Minister and his wife, saving them from assassination, while Evie will go on a mission with Henry where he gets caught and has to be rescued. She also returns some money plates that were stolen during the chaos Jacob caused at the banks, effectively avoiding another calamity. We end up killing the Earl of Cardigan, who is known as the hero of Balaclava, and also happens to be behind this chapter's plot to kill the Prime Minister. This has gotta be the sloppiest mission I did, as I literally stacked bodies a few feet from the door, but was still awarded a stealth kill as I had checked the right boxes. Just wild, but okay. The next chapter will be short but interesting one as we spend it hanging out with the leader of the Blighters, Maxwell Roth, who's willing to go after Steric just for the fun of it, which frankly is pretty damn awesome. Naturally, it all goes wrong when you remember that he's crazy and he tricks you into blowing up a building full of kids, but hey, the assassination is plenty of fun too, as once he's got you right where he wants you, Roth will really get the party started.
Now, before our final act, I would like to toast all you brave people who joined us tonight to celebrate life and death. Go on! Toast them! Your move, Jacob, my dear! Burn! Burn! Burn!
And I have to say, it was pretty satisfying to see it coming and already be above him as he kicked it off and just be ready to kill him. We also get a very real moment from Jacob after, as he begins to panic more and more when he fails to find a way out.
I'll never make it out alive.
You can hear real fear in his voice as he loses hope of escape. It's a nice moment for him. Well, probably not nice for him, but you know what I mean. He does get out, however, and that leads us to our endgame. It's been revealed that the Shroud, our piece of Eden this time, is under Buckingham Palace, and both parties will attend the Queen's party to get to it. It's fun as you will play with both the twins fulfilling different roles. Evie finding the blueprints to the palace while Jacob is rooting out Steric's men, both doing so while maintaining stealth and looking quite good if I do say so myself. This will then lead to what's possibly the worst boss fight in all of gaming. Seriously, Rick the Door Technician tops this.
The Jedi! Get ready to die! Ah!
Look, it's got problems, but play Jedi Survivor, it's so much fun. First, Jacob gets caught, so Evie will come in and have this epic exchange. The Shroud continues to heal his wounds, so the two of them will literally just take turns beating him and accomplishing nothing. Until it occurs to them to take off his damn invincibility cloak. What a fucking idea. They make up, get knighted by the Queen, and that's the end of our story. Yeah, Henry, I feel you. Oh, well, that's not entirely true. There's a cutscene where the modern-day assassins suck at their job per usual, and the assassins get the Shroud where it's revealed they're trying to bring a precursor back to life. I haven't ever played past the first 10 hours of Origins, so I can't comment on how this will play into future titles like I usually can, but we get to find out together in the next entry. I genuinely don't mean to end these sections so abruptly, but it's how the games end themselves most of the time, so it just kind of flows naturally as I write a script outlining the plot. That being said, I don't really have any feelings about this plot. It's not like the end of Unity where I really needed to sit down and think about it to form my opinion. I'm not conflicted, I'm uninterested. Jacob and Evie both failed to elicit any kind of emotional response from me. It felt like when choosing to write a narrative about twins, they went for the two halves of the same coin approach, but they didn't do nearly enough to differentiate them. They feel different, to be sure, but neither feels like a complete character worthy of further attention beyond their overt traits. Evie is the one who sees the big picture, Jacob is the one who actually makes progress, for better or for worse. When you make it really simple, they sound like two sides of the same coin. Only whole when together, but they're just not that deep. You know, we say characters like Batman and the Joker compete with each other, but they are each their own character. There's just a piece that binds them. Jacob and Evie feel like one character they split up the pieces for. I know that part of the plot was them not really talking to each other, but their lack of interaction really made them weaker from where I'm sitting. It's a story about twins, and the twins never communicate with each other. It's just not, I don't know. I found myself falling into this character that felt right to play, and I feel as though most players will feel the same way, and like me, find themselves alienated from the character they spent less time with. The way I felt that, hey, at least Jacob is out there making moves against Starrick. He's killing Templars, he's saving kids from factories, he's building relationships with key figures around the city. Someone probably feels the same way about Evie. Speaking of Evie, I felt her relationship with Henry just kind of felt, I don't know, off and out of nowhere. But who knows, maybe if I spent more time with her, I'd see it. I don't know, I just never found myself invested in any part of the plot. Just about every character was unremarkable to me outside of Lucy, but only because she had a memorable end. I never found myself attached to any of the side missions, from Darwin to Dickens to Churchill, who we will talk about in a little bit, I promise. The Templars versus Assassins ideals felt like they took a very big backseat to everything else here, and that certainly didn't help. The problem becomes I care neither for the small details or the big picture when it comes to the Fry twins' time in London, and in my eyes that is an abject failure. At least I cared enough to be angry at Assassin's Creed 3. Of all the things you can be, to be boring is by far the most criminal, and that's the only way I can think to discuss Syndicate's story. Boring. Shame that. It could have been great. So I'm in a weird spot with this because I've really talked about all the other side content, but this didn't fit there, nor did it feel right inside the narrative, so I'd like to just kind of gloss over it here. At the end of the Thames, there's a portal that will transport you to World War I in the shoes of Lydia Fry, whose name I totally didn't just have to Google, as you root out a Templar spy network alongside Winston Churchill. This will open up after level 6. Is it the most amazing hour you're going to spend inside of Syndicate? No. But since they control the level and skill set of the character you're using, it's probably the best balanced section in the game, and that's at least worth appreciating. Also, I really appreciate the complete and utter lack of attempt to reskin the Rooks and Blighters, showing that in the end, the entire gang war was for nothing. After most, but not all of the missions around the district, you'll get some info from Juno about herself, arguing that if Desmond trusted her, why can't the rest of us? Minerva's right!
Instant. There will be no pain.
You mustn't.
It's done, Minerva. The decision's made.
It's the wrong one! Yeah, good luck with that argument on this channel. Yet again, I find myself in turret segments inside of an Assassin's Creed game and confirm it felt just as out of place here as it did in Unity. This isn't a super big part of the game, but I felt it was worth at least touching on. Also, can we just talk about this game's attempt to read my intentions on this free run down? Because holy shit. What are you... Bro. Anyways, let's give a little look to the music, shall we? Or a listen, I don't know. Well, actually, as I'm writing this, I'm remembering that even though I literally played the game today, I don't really remember the music. I do remember liking it, though. Give me a minute and I'll check it out. Alright, I have now listened to the whole album and confirmed my suspicions that there are in fact bangers to be found inside. Enjoy. So I'm curious, I seem to remember liking the music throughout the entire thing, but it all seemed to feel like one song the entire time. I don't know, bit interesting. Good overall though, good soundtrack. Well, we find ourselves at the end of Syndicate, and I find myself a bit down. I know I still have Jack the Ripper to put out next week, but in reality, this is the end of what I really consider to be Assassin's Creed games. While it's true, I think the series was on a downward slide for years before this, what followed is an entirely different beast. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is something Assassin's Creed to be found in Origins. We're both just gonna have to wait to find out, I guess. For now though, back to Syndicate. It's a game that I really, even 5,500 words in and 20 hours played, I somehow feel nothing for. The city and its liveliness do stand out for me, and I think that will be a positive I take from this game. I'm trying to take at least one positive from each, but everything else just has me so bleh. I can confidently say I've played a lot of Assassin's Creed lately, and while this doesn't offend me as some titles in the series have, it doesn't scratch that itch for me either. There's a hell of a lot of characters in this game when you include all the side missions you take part in, and yet I can barely remember anyone's name. For all the famous people here like Darwin, Dickens, and Marx, they just don't stand up to even the paltry amount of Leonardo we get in Brotherhood. We have a pretty perfectly sized cast of Templars here to deal with, few enough to get real stories unlike the Pazzi conspirators, but enough to actually feel like they're a real threat. Yet even with Miss Thorne and Mr. Roth creating unique personas, I won't be remembering them like I did Sabrand. Henry is our only fellow assassin, and let's be honest, he's pretty weak as a character, with basically no exciting moments to speak of. For the first time, we have a pair of protagonists, and yet neither of them alone, or even together, are as interesting as Altair, Ezio, Edward. Hell, at least I hated Connor. I feel nothing for the Fry twins. With this entry, you can see how we ended up with Origins. I just wish we had returned to what had made the series great, not abandoned it entirely. As usual, the DLC and Jack the Ripper next week, which I've never actually played, so that should be fun. I'm writing this months before you'll see it, so I have no idea how the first Q&A went, so if you have questions or beef, drop it in the comments and I'll get back to you on the next one. That's going to be the end of Syndicate though, guys. Thank you so very much for hanging around to the end, and if you wouldn't mind dropping me a sub, I would very much appreciate it. Jack the Ripper next week, Origins after that. I hope to see you then. This is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile. Thanks, guys.
And you come to me with talk of this Jacob Fry, this insignificant blemish who calls himself assassin? You disrespect the very city that works day and night so that we may drink this miracle, this tea.